As PlayStation 1 Platformer Month comes to a close, we're going to take a look at one more title that I'm sure many more of you have probably played than the other games we've reviewed so far. It's getting close to 2 years ago that I reviewed Spyro 1, which is one of my favorite games on the PS1. It has such a simple structure, but it does so much right to build an entertaining and whimsical world to explore. Spyro 2 is easily the longest game of all of them that I've reviewed this month, and I'd say it's also the best by far. So why don't we take a look at why I think that is. Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, otherwise known as Gateway to Glimmer if you're one of those people who likes their PlayStation logos in the wrong place and their Spyro logos to look thrown together, was released in North America on November 2nd of 1999, and the 5th in the incorrect region of the world. It was developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony. Spyro 2 follows our titular character in his quest to save a brand new realm from the clutches of a tiny but dangerous monster known as Ripto. After saving the Dragon Realm from themselves, their racist culture, and their giant egos, watch my first review to see what I mean, Spyro feels he deserves a break. He heads through the portal toward Dragon Shores, when suddenly he's redirected to a realm known as Avalar. Avalar is in trouble, and needs the help of a dragon to stop Ripto from continuing to wreak havoc. Now stuck in Avalar, Spyro resigns himself to helping, if only because it should allow him to get back to a realm where his own kind rules, the racist bastard. And that is where we come in. When Spyro 2 starts up, the player would be forgiven for thinking that the game makes no strides to grow or innovate. It's not until about halfway through the first stage that you'll notice any major changes, but after that, they come flooding in at a rapid pace. To start with the most major change, Spyro 2 improves on Spyro 1 mechanically by asking the player to do a wider variety of things, while also giving them many new abilities, both subtle and not. The major abilities Spyro gets while he adventures includes climbing ladders, swimming, and a head bash. Each of these has to be bought through a character known as Moneybags. Moneybags also asks Spyro to pay to enter some levels or unlock new areas. Spyro has a few minor abilities now as well that he didn't have before. These ones he has from the start, like the ability to pick up objects in his mouth and spit them out, or the ability to flutter to get just an extra bit of height from a glide. One of the other changes is in the form of ability gates, which Spyro can find throughout levels, and activate through a sufficient amount of murder. Kill enough of Ripto's goons and you can use these gates to gain temporary abilities like flight, fireball breath, ice breath, or a spring jump that will automatically send you to new areas. This is in contrast to Spyro 1, where sometimes fairies would give you super fire breath, but that's about it. It didn't change anything mechanically so much as just allowed you to destroy metal things with fire for a short time. Probably the most drastic change, however, comes with the design of the goals in stages. Spyro 1 was a straightforward platformer, where the goal was more or less just to get through the stages, freeing fellow dragons. Spyro 2 instead asks the player to actually help the citizens of Avalar directly, with whatever issues they may have. Find an NPC and they'll tell you what's troubling them. It's then up to you to play a minigame or explore a certain area or whatever it may be to fix their problem. For succeeding, you get orbs. Orbs are used to unlock some levels and progress at certain points, meaning you will need to do some of these objectives. But I have literally never found myself in front of something that needs orbs where I didn't already have enough. As long as you explore, you should always have enough to progress. Talismans are the main progression gate anyway. In order to progress to the second and third hub worlds, you need to collect talismans from each level. How do you get said talismans? Well, you just beat the level. Seriously, you can probably get all the way to the third hub world in about 15 minutes if you just sprinted through each of the levels. Not really a problem, just an observation. The minigames in Spyro 2 are a pretty sweet addition for the most part, but they can drag pretty hard at times, depending on what you're doing. With more emphasis on variety, the gameplay itself sees a bit less focus and a bit less balance. Platforming is arguably a secondary aspect of the game now, and is extra easy compared to the previous game. Level progress is gated more often than in the first game, and a lot of the platforming feels more like it's just a means to get to the next quest. However, one big plus is that the levels feel more organically designed in some ways, with them usually wrapping around on themselves with really sweet shortcuts for easy exploration. But these shortcuts only open up after exploring the level initially, and repeat visits see these shortcuts closed again, requiring the player to redo everything. The thing is, because Spyro gets new abilities, some levels force you to backtrack through them, which seems silly. I usually play through the game with a code that unlocks all of the abilities from the start, since I prefer clearing the game from the start to the finish with no backtracking. While I didn't do that for this review, obviously, it doesn't actually break the game. Instead, it reframes the game to work more like Spyro 1 did, just with minigames. Still, the backtracking here is the least offensive between Klonoa, Croc, and Spyro 2. It's only like 3 or 4 levels that absolutely require backtracking. It can be done as soon as you get the proper power, and it usually leads to more fun content rather than being brought on by the developers trolling players with harsh design. But because of the more gated level design, it does often mean repeating a few minutes of content you've already done when you go back to a level. Shady Oasis, for example, requires that the player go through the entire stage hitting trees so that it'll drop fruit. This fruit makes a little hippo guy grow giant so he can smash through doors for you. Strange, I know. Point is, you can't get to the end without going through all of this. This is a level you need to do twice. And what's at the end that requires this backtracking? A single metal box with a bullseye on it that needs head bash, and a minigame where you need to head bash 8 hippo guys encased in rock before they're submerged in lava. This minigame takes around 10 seconds, is extraordinarily easy, and would have been exactly the same if instead of head bashing the hippos, you charged them. It's actually one of the worst minigames in all of Spyro 2. But the point is, this level should have been completable on the first visit, because there's simply not enough here for a repeat visit. You wouldn't need backtracking to do anything but the very first level if the game didn't require that you had every talisman to fight bosses. If you could skip levels that would normally require backtracking, you could still get to the end, grab the abilities, and then do these levels wholesale. But you can't, because you need the talismans. Even then though, until you explore a level, you won't know which ones you can't finish on your initial visit. So with that in mind, they really should have opened up the design of backtracking levels, and allowed you to skip a lot of the stuff that you do on your first time. The level Mystic Marsh feels like it was the first level created in that way. Design-wise, it's more similar to a Spyro 1 level, with its open structure that allows you to go pretty much everywhere from the start. It has several more unique models than the other levels. The music is also similar to Spyro 1 while still being a new track. It doesn't restrict player progression like most of the other levels, and it has a quest that sticks out as unique, which is my favorite quest, where you have to trade a bunch of items to the right people in the right order. It feels like a level full of experiments where they tried to find a base formula to work with. Because of this, it's actually sort of my favorite level, because it kind of has the best of both worlds. I know that makes it sound like the backtracking is really terrible here. Between this, Klonoa, and Croc, it sounds like the worst. But it isn't. The backtracking here may not respect the player's time terribly well, but it is straightforward, clear to the player, has a few tools to make it easier, and doesn't ask the player to repeat stages ad nauseum because of a one-chance design. Secrets in Spyro 2 aren't hidden as well as they are in the first game though, and despite levels feeling organic from an individual design perspective, as a whole they clearly follow a much more strict formula. It's cool that Aquaria Towers slowly fills with water as you progress, but doing this still requires going through 3 different sections and hitting 3 buttons. As I said, this gated progression is pretty universal here, and I think it limits level design. You won't find any levels like Treetops from Spyro 1, where it's set up like a series of islands that you supercharge between using ramps. And as such, the design of levels feels a little smaller in scale and more predictable, so secrets naturally are easier to find. This is doubly true now that you can hold a certain button combination to allow sparks to tell you where the nearest gems are. They still spice things up though, wherever they could, like by adding secrets in speedway levels. After you complete a speedway, you can freely explore it. There's always a hidden objective in each speedway, which offers you an orb upon completion. Bosses in Spyro 2 have definitely improved from the first game too. They're more difficult, more engaging, and more eventful. They genuinely feel like important parts of the journey and allow the player to feel strikingly powerful. These bosses themselves have more attacks at their disposal, are separated from the main levels aesthetically, and provide a genuine challenge. Finally, there's Dragon Shores, your reward for completing the game. Dragon Shores is a series of minigames set up like an amusement park. Well, I say it's a series of minigames, but there are really only 2 of them, and 2 distractions. One minigame is a simple shooting gallery, while another is a roller coaster where Spyro needs to pop a series of balloons. The roller coaster is entertaining enough, with the shooting gallery being a bit too easy. The 2 distractions are a short cutscene that shows characters from across the game riding Tunnel of Love boats, and the other is a dunk tank where Spyro can dunk a few enemies from the game. Each of these attractions offer Spyro tokens. There are 3 versions of the roller coaster, 3 versions of the shooting gallery, 3 enemies to dunk in the dunk tank, and the Tunnel of Love gives you a single token. Once you have all 10, you can then enter a cutscene theater, allowing the player to rewatch any of the major cutscenes. This is a welcome bonus for beating the game. However, if you 100% it, there's a much more interesting reward waiting for you. Complete every level in its entirety, which is not at all hard to do, and the player can enter a room with a fireball power-up. This fireball power-up is unique in that it lasts forever, meaning you can freely explore any of the levels with the ability to essentially shoot long-range grenades from Spyro's mouth. Granted, since you've already beat the game, this might not see much use, but it's still one of those sorts of things that every kid would love to have when they initially experience the temporary version of said power-up in other levels. Note that if you want, you can also use a cheat code to get this. The presentation in Spyro 2 is a marked improvement over the first game. Graphically, it's about the same, but the characters, acting, animation, scene structure, and writing is a huge improvement. There are several scenes in this game that genuinely inspire real laughter, which Spyro 1 never really did. There are also a lot more scenes to watch in general, with each stage having an opener and a closer that bookend the idea of the stage itself. My favorite is ironically Shady Oasis, despite being lukewarm on the level. Hub worlds take a bit of a hit because of this though. They're interesting to explore, but they're entirely detached from the levels and their themes. Each level is so diverse that the hubs just feel like bland padding, because despite their names being themed, they themselves don't really have that great of a theme. The music to me is a slight bit less interesting than in Spyro 1. I wouldn't say it's a step back, but I prefer the more sparkly, curious, melodic feel of the original. None of it's ever close to being bad music, it's fantastic. I just prefer the soundtrack from the first game. Luckily for me, I suppose, a few songs from Spyro 1 are recycled here. And again, I really like the track from Mystic Marsh. Spyro 2 isn't perfect. Then again, neither was the first game. Spyro 2 is more inspired in a lot of ways, but there are also times when this inspiration gets in the way of consistency and focus. Spyro 2's stumbles are generally small, when compared to how smooth and easy it is to enjoy the experience as a whole. I still prefer the simplicity and the more free-form design of the original, but I can't deny that Spyro 2 is still a fantastic game, a must-play on the PS1 and easily the best game out of the 4 I looked at over the last month. Speaking of, we're finally at the end of PS1 Platformer Month. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed it and expect more to come. I've already got one idea for another month of that I think everyone will enjoy even more than this one. It'll take a lot of work and I probably won't get to it for a while because of that, but hopefully it'll come faster than this one did. 2 years in between months of is a bit ludicrous. Normal videos are coming up next, so get hyped or whatever. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you're interested in another one, here's the last one that I uploaded. You can also follow me on Twitter or subscribe by hitting the subscribe button.